To another American TESOL Presents Free Friday webinars. We are here because of AmericanTESOL.com, where you can get certifications for teaching with technology, for teaching advanced ESL, for teaching young learners ESL, and also for teaching business English. Today we're going to talk about BYOT, and for those of you who are new to this, it stands for Bring Your Own Technology. Sometimes it's also with the acronym BYOD, which is Bring Your Own Device. And the difference is with technology, it includes bringing in laptops, bringing in, the students can bring in Chromebooks, they can bring in digital cameras, any kind of technology they have, including their mobile devices. So a lot of schools are doing this as a way to get technology into the classroom. And also because, especially if you're teaching adolescents all the way to adults, they tend to have their mobile devices with them. And if they don't have a mobile device when they're adolescents, they tend to at least have an iPod or somewhere where they are able to access apps. And so this can be a really great learning tool inside the classroom. And if you can't afford technology, then it's a great way to be able to get students to do things with technology. But definitely there's a lot of questions, and there's a lot of steps and infrastructure that has to be in place before you allow students to bring their own technology. And so we're going to talk about those today. Now, the advantage is that if you set this up correctly, and if you do you go over with parents and students the regulations, what's allowed, if you talk to them about important issues such as their data rates, their data plans, how you can avoid the students using their own data, and you cover these kind of issues, as well as managing an entire classroom and school with devices, then you'll be pretty successful. And there's some great things that students can do with this technology. The great thing about it, especially for language learners, is that with mobile devices, students are able to look up vocabulary. They're able to practice different phrases. They're able to learn with different types of mobile apps, such as Busuu, such as Duolingo. I mean, there's so much learning potential. And if we can get the students to really use their device for learning outside of our classroom, instead of constantly just texting in their own language or just on social networks in their own language, then if we get them to practice English with their mobile device, then that's a lot of learning they're doing outside the classroom. Also, because we want to show students that when they do have a question, they don't have to wait to get to class to ask that question. We want to show them how they can use their device to be able to access that knowledge when they need it, when the situation arises. A lot of the ideas I'm sharing today are in my book, Learning to Go, and I have handouts there and rubrics. I made this little graph to kind of talk about, what's entailed with BYOT, or Bring Your Own Technology. You can either decide to do this as a school, which is optimal if you can talk to your leadership and if you can talk about getting this in place and setting up procedures, putting up documents, such as, and we'll talk about those kind of documents, and I'll show you where you can find similar documents so you can model all of yours on. But the important part is if you get the school leadership on board. If you just do this in your class and you just want to test it out, you still have to let school leadership know. But there's definitely a lot of things that that would be much better if it was if it was the entire school versus the classroom. But you can definitely try it in class. If you are doing this on your own in class, I recommend something like Mobile Mondays or Technology Thursdays. Set aside a day where you dedicate to using technology and students bringing their devices and being able to use that within the classroom. If you do that, that's going to be much easier to manage. That way, students know as soon as they walk in the classroom on Thursdays, then they're able to use their device. You've already put the procedures in place. And that way, every single day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, you can still teach and be comfortable. And then you don't have to keep concentrating so much on classroom management, because it will take some practice managing a room full of devices at the beginning. So that would be my tip. Another tip that I would recommend is, after you've gotten all of this infrastructure in place, is to also have procedures like, for example, you can have a place where students put their devices, especially if it's mainly mobile devices. So I've seen teachers have desks with cups. I've seen them have shoe racks on the door, and that's where students put their mobile devices when they're not using them in class. And then when you're ready to use them, they'll go and they'll take it um, out of that shoe rack. I think it's really great because it's clear plastic wrap, so you don't really have to worry about someone stealing, because you can see and it's right there on the door. So it'd be very difficult for someone to steal the device. But here are some of the ideas when it does come to classroom management. Creating relationships, having the conversation with students about citizenship, what is expected when they do get to use the device, what are codes of conduct, and what are the consequences if students don't follow those codes of conduct. And that's really important to talk about at the beginning, because you want to have the conversation where you talk about, we're trusting you to bring your device or your technology, and you have to use it responsibly. And if you don't, these are the consequences. And the consequences are usually that they're not allowed to use it for that day or for that week. Also, if you're working with students and not all of them have technology to bring in, that's okay. One of the things you can do is you can have a lot of activities where when students do use their technology, that you group them or you pair them. So that way someone always has access to the technology. So that's something important to find out ahead of time, whether everyone has access to some kind of technology. Even, and it doesn't have to be a smartphone. It can be a regular cell phone, or it could even be something like an iPod, or they have the Android versions of those, which aren't telephones. And then they also have really inexpensive tablets, and also digital cameras do a lot as well. And then we'll talk about some activities, what kind of activities to choose, and what to do when you don't have any internet. So the first important question is, does your school have internet access? And if it does have internet access, can the students access that safely? Do they need passcodes? How would they be able to do that with the device? Um, is your internet access at school able to handle everyone using the internet at one time? So that's important to also note. If you are working in a school and you have very little internet access, one thing you can do is you can rotate days that different teachers either use the internet, or you can rotate days that certain subjects use the internet, or grade levels. So for example, maybe on Mondays, the science classes can use it. On Tuesdays, then math classes, and so on and so on. If you divide it like that, and you manage things like this, then you're able to get everyone to be able to benefit from using the technology. So one of the best sites that has a great bring your own device policy and website, and that's definitely something you should build within the school. So when you decide to do this, you should have the policy, and you should have questions and everything on a website. Or you could definitely put these as handouts. If you want to send this to parents as paperwork, you're more than welcome to do that as well. There is some paperwork they're going to have to sign with this. So but the one that I recommend is this one from this particular school, which is the Hanover Public School District. So you can model a lot of your website, your citizenship, just the different parts of the infrastructure, what they have. They have how to connect. They talk about data. They talk about what types of devices are allowed. Things like, okay, you can bring your laptop, but you can't bring your Game Boy. The other thing that's important to note is also insurance. So students and parents are going to be concerned about, well, what if my child brings in their own device and it gets stolen, or what if they break it on the school property? So what a lot of school districts do is either purchase insurance for these, or they give parents a site that talks about insurance on their devices. And that makes having a BYOT policy much easier if you have these in place. And usually the insurance is not very expensive. It's sometimes like $1 or €1 or something like that in some change, depending what companies you go with. And so the really important part is getting parents on board. You're going to need something like an acceptable, responsible, or digital use policy. They're the same, they're basically the same thing. What it says is it says um, what it talks about students' code of conduct while they're using the devices, things like whether, not to access their own data plans, and what happens if they don't follow those codes of conduct. It also talks about what kind of sites that you might visit, what kind of things students would do. Are they going to create videos with their mobile devices? Or with their technology? Are they going to create podcasts? These are some of the things you outline inside your digital use policy. You also can address parents' concerns in a workshop. Now, I always host a parent workshop where I get parents to play with the web tools or do some of the things that we would do in class, little quick digital icebreakers, just so they get comfortable. And that way they can ask me questions in person and we can take care of this ahead of time. It's also a good way when the parents do come to the workshop, the ones that are there, for me to get them to sign the digital use policy. The digital use policy also outlines or gives permission, parents can give permission to have their students publish things on the web, which is also really important. Which devices? Well, there's plenty of devices your students can bring in. Like I've said before, they don't have to have expensive devices. What I have found, and I've done this in many different countries all over the world, Venezuela, Croatia, Slovenia, in over 20 something countries, I often do BYOT. And I also will teach in those classrooms with the teachers so we can work together and implement this. And what I have found is, yes, there's always a student that has the best, most expensive technology. And most of the students have something in between, like maybe some will have not a very expensive cell phone, depending on the country. And some others might even have access to a digital camera. And actually, many of the kids actually tend to have access to laptops or Chromebooks or something like that. So if that's the situation, I find that a lot of students, they don't mind that their peers, they think it's very cool, but usually the majority of the students do not have a very expensive device. Most of the students have in between. And so usually that's not a problem as far as, the rich versus poor. The other thing is that they like sharing each device or getting into groups because I group them. And usually what I do is I'll group someone with a laptop with someone with a device that allows apps. It could be an iPod or it could be a smartphone, and someone with a cell phone. And then I get them to use each of these in ways to accomplish a task. So for example, if they're making a movie, Then they can usually, with the regular cell phone, sometimes they can take pictures to add to that movie. Maybe with a smart device, they can record a movie and then they could edit that movie. And then they can use their laptops and put it all together and make something really great. So I try to do things like that so that way all the students are able to see and work together. You can ask students ahead of time what devices they have. I have this survey that you're more than welcome to copy. It's a student technology use survey. Edit it how you want. It's your own copy, but it asks questions like their first and last name, which of the following technologies do they have access to, which are they allowed to bring in, do they have internet access at home, which is also very important, or do they access the internet at the library, or where they access the internet. Do they mostly use a mobile device? Do they mostly use a laptop? What kind of technologies do they use? If you do have, if your students do have access to the internet and are able to go on the internet, then it's really, really important that they have a place to go to visit and find out about the class and talk with their peers. And this is called a virtual learning environment, a VLE, or a learning management system. Some of the best free ones, and by the way, everything I share has a free option. So I always try to get teachers to share things that teachers can use that are free. Um, Most teachers tell me they really love Schoology and Edmodo the best. Um, I know teachers who also like using Google Classroom. And in a lot of the countries, the developing countries I work at, have Moodle in place. So that can be the place where you set up a classroom and make sure that students know how to access that on their devices. So that way they can work on projects and stuff while they're at home as well. And they can check their assignments and grades, and you can share resources. So what web tools and apps should support? All your web tools and apps that you do choose is very important when you are doing BYOT. Um, and the reason why is you need to be able to choose apps that are on multiple devices. So not all your students will have access maybe to a mobile device. Maybe some will need access to the web. So you need something that works on the mobile device as well as the web. You need to choose a tool that will work on an Android, on an iOS device, on a Windows device. So one of the tools that definitely does that is Google. So Google Apps and Tools, you can find out a lot more at shelleyterrell.com/Google. But these are, with Google, you can pretty much do anything, and your students can work together to create slide presentations, spreadsheets, documents, drawings. I mean, there's just so many options. So definitely Google is one of those great tools if you have BYOT. And that's what I use a lot for when I use BYOT, when I have, well, I use Google anyways. Microsoft is getting some tools for that as well. So if a lot of your students, if it is Microsoft based, I find it a lot easier to use Google, but I've heard that Microsoft has gotten much better at that. So Microsoft can be an option too. That's what your school uses. I know a lot of teachers love OneNote, and that's what they use sometimes as well for BYOT. OrmyBoard.com is really great. Students can access with a mobile device with a code, so they don't have to register. All they need is a code to access the lesson. And then they can add, your lesson plans can have students add text, it can have them draw, it can have them add clip art, take pictures, and all sorts of different activities. They can have quizzes, they can have different types of assessments. They can see a video and answer questions. I mean, there's so much that they can do on OmniBoard. It's a way for you to be able to show a lesson to all your students at one time. And the great thing is it controls what they see. So once they put in the code, they go to the website and you'll get the link, and then you give them the link. They turn in the code. Well, usually they just go to omniboard.com, and then it asks for the code. They put in the code, and then they access your lesson. If it's a presentation, then they all see the presentation on their device. And that presentation will not move. The window won't move until you move it. So it's a way that you can deliver a lesson and also manage a classroom full of different devices. Nearpod is the same. I really like Nearpod. Nearpod is actually what I've used many times. Nearpod allows me to upload handouts that students can fill out on any device as well. There's quizzes, there's polls, there's open-ended questions, there's where they can draw. When they do submit images or they submit a poll, then everyone gets to see it on the screen if you choose. So when students are turning in the work, they have an option where you can show who's turned in what. So that way, it's very cool, especially when they have photos. It just puts the photos up, and then you can see the different photos that are there. So I really like Nearpod a lot. Nearpod is the same. Your students don't have to register for Nearpod. You register for a free account. You create the lesson. You can even try it by uploading a PowerPoint slide. That's what I first did when I went to Nearpod. And then what I did was I tested. I gave someone else the code, and they went to nearpod.com. They entered the code, and then they were able to do the lesson. So they also have lessons on Nearpod and Ormy board that other teachers have set up for free. So you can take a look at those. GoFormative is another type of way that you can assess students. You can pull they can it's great for math, it's good for CLIL, it's good for diagrams. So there's a lot, and all of these work on any device. They work on the web, they work on Android, they work on an iPhone. So these three websites I've just showed you, these three web tools work with multiple devices, and they have free accounts for teachers. They usually do have a limit. So for example, with Nearpod, once you reach so many gigabytes, then they ask if you can either delete your lessons, or they'll ask you if you want to pay for a premium account. So all of these do have like a free account, but they may have, for more features, you'd have to pay for those. Socrative.com is another way to assess students. They have things like space races, quizzes, exit tickets, short answers, true and false, multiple choice. It's on many different types of devices as well. My two personal favorites are Padlet and Linowit, especially Padlet. I use Padlet for everything now. The great thing about Padlet is I can just give students a URL. Once again, they don't have to register. Now, the reason why I'm telling you about sites like Nearpod, Omniboard, and Padlet, where they don't have to sign up for the web tool, is because when you work with multiple devices, and also when you work with BYOT, your students' main concern and parents' main concern, other than safety, of course, is data. They don't want their children to use a lot of data at school, and then they have this huge phone bill or this huge bill. So if your students don't have to download an app, then that's one of the best options. If you can use web tools and where they can access the information, but they don't necessarily have to download the app. So Padlet is like that. Padlet is really great when you when you can download an app, but you don't have to. It's accessible on any device. You can password protect your Padlets, so that way students enter a password, and not everyone on the internet has access to your Padlet. So that's great. You can upload PDFs and share those with your students. You can share lesson plans on Padlet. I've done that before. You can share the rubric. You can share handouts. I've done that on a Padlet. And then I've created different Padlets for students to complete and contribute the lesson. Okay, so that's what I've done too. Linowit, as Peggy George mentioned, she said, I used to use Linowit because Padlet wasn't very good. And I did as well. But now Padlet has gotten so great that now I just only use Padlet. But Linowit is really great when you need color-coded sticky. So basically all the student does is they click on the wall, and then one of these little squares pops out, and then the students can add links, videos, audio. They can do so much. They can pretty much turn in anything. Um, but if you want it color coded, so let's say that you're asking questions and you want to put all of your questions in blue, and you want the different student groups. Let's say student group 1 answers the question in red, student group 2. So if you want to make it color coded, and there's a time when color coding is necessary, then use Linowit. It's important to know different types of so I showed you different types of web tools, but what's really important is the pedagogy, and there is a lot of pedagogy when it comes to integrating technology. These are some of the ones that I think our teachers really like, that also provide the most insight to give you ideas on how to integrate technology. So digital blooms, which also comes in different languages. I've used that with teachers in Venezuela when I was training in Spanish. They have digital blooms in Spanish. They even have all of the PDFs and background information in Spanish. So that's really great. The SAMR model, and now a lot of people are now doing different types of SAMR. You can Google these and learn more about them, or you can go to shellyterrell.com tech tips, and you'll find links to these different resources. But this is what the Andrew Churches has the Ed Origami, and that talks about digital blooms. Connectivism, you can find it in this link here. Steve Wheeler talks a lot about, he's Timbukteeth on Twitter, but he has a lot of different slides about integrating technology and what's the pedagogy behind that. And then here's a great sketch note by Sylvia Duckworth on the SAMR model. If you want more tech tips, and I know I'm going through this pretty fast, but that's because we're wrapping this up pretty soon. There's so much that I could tell you, but it's only 30 minutes. So you can go to shellyterrell.com/tech tips. And of course, you can always also download the slides. So if you want to download the slides, don't worry that you didn't copy down all the information. You can find the slides. I've just posted them in the chat box, and then you'll be able to have all of this information in the slides. And it downloads as a PDF. So these are all the possibilities. You could do one of these lessons each week. You could focus on a different type of use or creation with technology. Students can record audio, they can record interviews, they could do videos, comics. There's just so many possibilities. So where do you start? There's so many possibilities. Let's say you're new and you don't know where to start. Well, what I would do is take a lesson or a project that you're very comfortable with, a project-based learning, okay? So take one project. One of the projects I know a lot of teachers do in pretty much every subject is a poster project. And then what you can do is add a technology component to it. So, for example, students now, instead of doing the poster board, they can use any of these free tools. You decide which one you like. I usually get students to do EduBunsies or work with Canva or something. And then students, I say, okay, you're going to use an EduBunsy. You're going to create a digital poster. Now, if you don't have access to the internet, what other technologies can they use to create a digital poster? Well, there happen to be PowerPoint templates for creating a poster. If you go to shellyterrell.com poster, you can actually download those templates for students to create a digital poster with PowerPoint. So there are ways for students to create digital posters, and they don't need an app if that's your concern. So you decide the technology, and then that's a simple way to add technology to a lesson plan, is to have the students put that information and design it digitally, so that way they don't have to pay for the materials to create a poster. So that saves them money, but that also provides a way for you to get them to share their projects, and also to keep that information year after year. So where do you find great tools if you decide, hey, I want my students to create a video, or I want my students to create a podcast, or I want my students to create a comic? Well, you can go to edshelf.com. They have a search tool. You just enter, you click on the search and you enter, okay, comics, I'm teaching children. I want it free. We have Chromebooks. And then Edshelf will tell you all these teacher reviewed apps, and it'll let you know if it's free or not. And it's just so wonderful. So if you need to know any tool, then you can go to edshelf.com. It's like the Google search for web tools. And teachers run this and recommend and have reviews about the different tools that are listed. Common Sense also has a list of tools and different ratings and reviews as well, but I find Edshelf much more helpful. You want your students, when they do integrate technology and its BYOT, especially on their own devices, you want them to be able to bookmark the resources and also their activities. Live binders, Peggy George has recently been tweeting a lot. That Live Binders now has a lot of different features that it's and integrating into Google as well. It's really safe for all students. It's great for young learners, for children. It's great for adolescents and teenagers as well. It's made for educators, so that's a tool that I would recommend. It's free and it's on multiple devices. Your students will have to sign up for Live Binders though, so that's just one note. But all of these tools they would have to sign up for. When you create groups, I recommend 3 to 4. I tend not to do more than 4. There should be a team leader, an organizer, deliverer, reporter. The deliverer is the one who always turns in the project to the teacher, whether it's through a flash drive, whether it's through uploading on one computer. So it's really important to have that deliverer so that way you get the group's work. They're in charge of that. The organizer makes sure everyone contributes to the digital project. And then the reporter, when you have a class presentation, one person speaks and will do like a 1 or 2 minute presentation about what the group came up with, their solutions. For example, if you created different types of TV commercials, let's say they created TV commercials for something, then one person goes and introduces the commercial and then shows the commercial. And that keeps everything managed. I talk about that in my book, Learning to Go. If you want to learn a lot more about BYOT, BYOD, or EdTech in general, these are the hashtags that I recommend. BYOD. If you just Google these, then you'll be led to Twitter that has all kinds of resources that teachers share. All kinds of tips, leads you to bloggers. And if you are on Twitter, you can use these hashtags to ask questions. So a lot of times I see new people come on Twitter, new teachers, and they don't add a hashtag to their question. So a lot of times they won't get an answer. But if you add a hashtag, then more people see that question, especially the ones that probably have the answers and experience because they use that hashtag, and they're more likely to give you great answers. And that's it. You can, I have a Pearl Trees where I've bookmarked a lot more information. You can go to my site, shellyturtle.com/mlearning, or teacherebootcamp.com, and you can find a lot more information there as well. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you can put those in the chat box. But I'm going to go ahead and end the recording since we went a little over. Thank you so much for attending.